Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather coming at you with another update. In this update, we're going to be talking about big snowstorms with Arctic air by mid-March. So before I do get started, if you do like weather-related content, please subscribe to my channel as I will upload daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. And I do ask you to share this video with your friends and family on social media. All right, so let's get started. Let's first start off and take a look at the overall teleconnections. And let's look at the PNA, which is the Pacific North Atlantic, and you can definitely see it's positive right now, and that's where they're bringing those warmer conditions out west. But look at the trend. By the time we get into next week, early next week, around the 8th or 9th time frame, you can definitely see it turns negative again. That'll bring some troughiness back into the western part of the U.S. and bring some colder air in that region as well. And that remains cold all the way through the next 2 weeks. So, but then you'll also take a look at the EPO, which is your Eastern Pacific Oscillation. You can see by even that one, that actually turns negative by the time, the 12th and 13th time frame. And that trend also continues negative all the way through beyond mid-March as some much colder air looks to enter the United States by then. So let me go over, kind of show you what I'm talking about here. If we take a look at the stratospheric warming event, this is the polar vortex. Now remember, we had that big event that went off on January the 7th. It took about a month to get down into the United States, and it came with a vengeance. And you've seen the extreme anomaly temperatures that hit a good chunk of the central and eastern part of the U.S. Now, that stratospheric warming event really hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. The Arctic is very warm. The polar vortex is weak. And we're starting to see some little leftover effects from that stratospheric warming event that could displace the polar vortex again back down into the United States. Here's what it looks like right now on March 5th. You can see it's fairly strong. The low pressure is to the right, but look at by the time the 18th rolls around, it really deepens, really amplifies. That polar lobe displaces down into the United States, and I do feel by the time we get into the middle of March, we'll have some much colder air to enter the picture, and probably for the second half of March. So let me kind of take you what I'm actually looking at. Here's the Indian Ocean. So if we go take a look at the vertical velocity index of the latest European control, we see that it's fairly warm right now around the 6th and the 11th time frame, and this is the Indian Ocean. So by the time we get into mid-March, you can definitely see the drier conditions are really amplified and has a lot of lift to it. We see a lot of lift in the vertical velocity index, and it becomes very wet. Typically, that implies we're looking at the MJO going into colder phases 2 and 3 right here by the time we get into the 15th of the month, and really starts to deepen around the 21st of March. And it continues that way through the end of March with a lot of precipitation in the Indian Ocean, and that would imply the MJO to be in some of the colder phases by then of phase 2 and phase 3. So let me kind of take a look at the overall look on the CFS V2. Here's where we're at on the MJO currently right now. We've been in basically phase 8, so we're getting much warmer conditions into the central part of the U.S. and the Dakotas with well above average anomalies. We saw a little bit of a cool down into the Northeast. It's trending into phase 1. But by the time we get into, closer around the 10th time frame, but closer to about the 15th time frame, it will trend into a much colder phase 2, and that continues into phase 3 through the end of March. And if you take a look at phase 2 and phase 3, they're both pretty cold over the United States. So I'm definitely looking at some much colder anomalies entering the picture of the United States by the time we get into mid-March, and that's actually just going to amplify the wetness and increase the snowfalls. And I'm looking at some possibly big snowstorms by then for the U.S. So let me take a look at the overall 500 millibar, the latest European model. This is the look it has right now. You can see the ridge over the center part of the U.S. That's your phase 8, right? And that's where it's really amplified with the well above average temperatures right now. It's had that little bit of a cool down into the northeast, but as we continue through the 8th, and as we get into the first week, of March, by the time the 8th rolls around on Monday, you can definitely see that troughiness really amplifies over the center of the U.S., but that P&A went negative, right? So this is Monday. So as it goes negative, it brings that trough into the western part of the U.S. with some much colder air, started to enter the picture. And here's the look on the 9th. So we look at the 500 millibar on the 9th. This really amplifies over the central and eastern parts of the U.S. I do feel we'll be trending into a little bit of a severe weather pattern, especially as we get into the middle of the week next week. But back behind, we have another developing trough in the Pacific Northwest. That's where the P&A continues to remain negative, right? And that'll amplify the pattern again and start to mix in by the time Thursday rolls around. And I do feel Thursday will probably be a key day over the United States where it could be a severe weather setup day for much of, parts of Texas and Oklahoma into Arkansas, Missouri, the Ohio Valley. So all this area right here with a very warm anomalies out ahead of it. And we got a trough coming on the backside. I do feel that is a severe weather day, but we have some much colder air by the time March the 11th rolls around. In portions of California, getting into Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. That'll bring some more snow for that region. But yeah, you can see the temperature anomalies, what it looks like on the 11th. So it's very warm over the U.S., especially in the south, trending to the north. But we got that troughiness that's coming in from the west. And I think that'll be the beginning stages of a much colder pattern entering the picture as we extend into the middle of the month. So by the time we get into the 14th, so this is the 14th, March the 14th on Sunday, we definitely see a trough coming down all the way down into Texas again. And there's going to be a lot of colder air. That's by the time the teleconnection is due to trend a little bit further negative by then. There's going to be some colder air. It's going to be shallow air. And there's going to be some snow underneath as well. So we could be talking snow again by the time the 14th rolls around for, yes, Texas. I do feel Texas has another snowstorm on the way for the deep south as we continue and show you on the 15th as it really amplifies by then with some much colder anomalies filtering in the central U.S. The EPA goes negative. The P&A will go negative. We have that stratospheric warming filtering down with some polar air entering the picture in the United States. And we have these much colder anomalies, 20, 25, almost 30 degrees below average temperatures for much of the South, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma, much of Texas, and even filtering into the Southeast this time. I don't think you missed out on this one, actually. And this only kind of deepens as we extend. Even by the 16th, we've got that EPO going negative by then. So all this is really amped. I mean, this should be some much colder Arctic air in the picture by then, with possibly another snowstorm setting up for the Northeast by the time 16th, 17th rolls around. So this is just going to be becoming a much more active pattern. And yeah, by the 17th, you can definitely see those colder anomalies trending further south this time, into the Southeast, into Florida this time, with some much colder air into the picture. And we're in phase 2 and phase 3 by then, and that typically means the active southern jet gets really active by then, and we could be looking at several rounds of colder and rainier, snowier weather for the deep south. And that would probably imply a Miller type A event coming up for the Northeast with these storms. So I'm looking at possibly a big snowstorm for the Northeast, and even one back behind that one by the time we end March. So I do feel we become into a more active, snowy pattern, especially in the second half of March. And here's by the 20th. I mean, you can definitely see that southern jet continues to remain active. that low pressure will deepen over the deep south, and that will take advantage of the warm air out ahead, colder air out ahead of it, and possibly have some more snow for you guys in the Northeast. So here's the latest operational run of the 10-day European model. You can definitely see as that P&A goes negative, those snows will start to increase in a big way by the time Monday of this week rolls around, and just kind of deepen and amplify as we go throughout the week next week. And by Sunday, we could be looking at some more snow flying over Texas. I mean, even right now, this model is showing 14 inches of snow. I mean, so there's a lot of colder air around this closed low, so don't take this verbatim, but it definitely gives you an idea of some much colder air entering the picture. And yeah, by the time the EPO goes negative, we'll have some bigger snows starting to enter the picture into the Northeast. And I just think this amplifies even further as we go. Here's the control run that takes you through the 19th. And you can definitely see those snows just extend further south as much more colder air enters the picture. And this will correct over time. So this is a long ways out. But to give you an idea, there's definitely much more colder air and a little bit more precipitation with it as well. So that would just enhance the snowfall for the second half of March. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.